He was just very, very smart. He could sit down and talk to you about any issue, technical or art or social or political.
And he was a good father, good son, good friend, good Christian.
Well, I think Mr. Farley had universal respect, even from those who were on opposite sides of him.
He had his hand on the throttle and he drove that boat, and he was really good.
Joe Farley was born in Birmingham, Alabama. His parents were wealthy. His grandfather was associated with building the Farley building in downtown Birmingham. His mother was a wonderful mother. She encouraged him in many ways. He had a brilliant mind and he had a brilliant education. He went to Birmingham Southern College for a year or two before he really went off to school. He went to Princeton University where he received a degree in mechanical engineering. Later, he got a law degree from Harvard University.
When I got out of law school, I was anxious to come back to Birmingham. I did talk to a few firms, one in Richmond, one in Atlanta, one in New York, but I really wanted to come back to Birmingham. Somehow the company's statewide activities, the rivers and the harnessing of the rivers, the steam plants, all that went with that interested me a great deal, and I suppose that had a good deal to do with my ultimate decision to come with what was then Martin Turner Blakey and Bolden.
He worked closely with Alvin Vogel and with Walter Bolden. They both had great respect for Joe. Joe was quite a talent.
So a lot of work went into that initial 14 or 15 years. When I joined the company, as I look back on it in 1965, it was a time of relative peace and tranquility. Construction of the river projects was coming to a conclusion. We had coal-fired plants under construction, and then by 1968 and 9, we were arriving at the decision to build the nuclear units. Also, we were beginning to see the first vestiges of some inflation.
And George Wallace had determined that he needed another issue to continue to get elected. When race was no longer viable, he changed to utility rates. A factor was that Mr. Farley and George Wallace in those years were kind of like oil and water. They came from two different worlds. And to say that in those days there was some friction there would be an understatement.
And it made our life and our employees' lives miserable. By the time we got to the middle 70s, our employees and their families would be insulted at the grocery store or on the street, and people would get snide remarks made to them at church. It was really an extremely difficult time for all hands. At one point, I had to have a security guard around my house.
So my dad had to take care of, doing home dialysis as well as raising, 3 children and running Alabama Power.
Joe Farley was, in my mind, clearly the most knowledgeable officer on the system about the regulations, about the licensing, and indeed a lot about the operations. He had immersed himself into the building and the operation of the Farley nuclear plant.
He was interested in nuclear, and he had been at the Alabama Power a long time as CEO, and it just seemed like a natural transition when the Southern Company is going to establish a new nuclear company. Joe Farley was the right person for it.
Nuclear is different, and it brought with it a number of different responsibilities and challenges that have been really a part of my life since the time that the decision was made in 1969 that we were going to go forward with this.
But his careful legal and regulatory guidance and putting the operating system together made it work. And without that, I don't think we could have done it successfully. But I think it's a great success story, and he gets the major credit as far as I'm concerned.
His intellect, his ability to analyze issues, and his utmost integrity. That's what I think most people will recall first if you ask them about Joe Farley, is his integrity.
He sometimes intimidated people because of his brilliance, but he was a very, very kind person.
The most amazing thing about Joe Farley, I can remember when there was a crisis, he was solid as a rock.
One time he was leaving the office early, a little bit before 3 o'clock, and he stopped and told his secretary, I'm sorry that I'm leaving, I'll be back later, but I have to drive the carpool this afternoon.
He really wanted to be sure that we were a close-knit family, especially after my mom died. He didn't want there to be any, we were all just around the table a lot, and it was just, he wanted family. He wanted to be in those grandchildren's lives, and he would take us on a trip every single summer, and all of us went, all the kids and all the grandkids. And so I think they take so much away from that.
Farley Nuclear Plant should be very proud that they are named after Joseph M. Farley, because you couldn't find a man of higher integrity, of higher intellect, that is more dedicated than Joe Farley.